the strategy of this war that's not talked about publicly is, hey, you wanted that Qatari LNG? How about the U.S. LNG? Because we both have a lot of trains coming online, starting last year through about 28, Bob? There's a big amount of supply coming online, and, market share in energy is a little dirtier business than retail, Jeff. Sometimes they get into the war game.
I mean, there was some concern that we would have overcapacity of LNG export facilities in that.
That was a huge short thesis for sure on that gas in like the 27 part of the curve.
Yeah, and so then that's pretty much out the window if you've got some of this Qatari capacity offline through that period.
So in the softer perspective, what can go right? I mean, it's this has been just a clown show pretty much from the jump. I mean, they've ignored the U.S. history of regime change efforts, not a super glorious past in that. They can't ignore the fact that no presidency has really been able to withstand, at least in the midterm basis, gas prices that are going parabolic. And so at some point, they're going to pull out the stops to try to reverse this. They can't have the rate of change anyway. If they get it back to 75, you're at least having a conversation. But what can go right in terms of driving oil down? There don't seem to be any quick fixes. What isn't anyone thinking about just yet that could happen?
It could happen, and it's not likely, but Trump met with all the heads of the oil companies in the U.S. And remember, these companies have been very strict the past 4 or 5 years in basically maintaining production, returning all excess cash flow to investors or shareholders. Can he twist their arm and say, you know what, ramp it up, start to grow your production? Can we add 1 million barrels a day of production in the Permian Basin in a short time period? Yeah, we could. Physically, we could. We drilled these wells in like less than a week. I mean, how quickly they can drill horizontal wells in the Permian is amazing. So what could go right? I'm not saying this is the base case or the likely case, but you said, what could go right? Could the administration incentivize or twist the arm of the Chevrons and Exxons and everybody to go into the Permian and ramp up their activity to, in 6 months, could you add 1 million barrels a day out of the Permian? Yeah, possibly. You could. I mean, it's conceivable if you just, put the accelerator to the floor and call in all these rig companies and service companies and add rigs and say, look, we're just going to start drilling these wells like crazy and increase our production out of the Permian. In 6 months, could you add 1 million barrels a day? Possibly. That's sort of the upside case. What could go right to really add the supply, the upside scenario, at the same time that they get control of the Strait of Hormuz and they're able to allow shipments through the Strait of Hormuz. At some point, that's got to give. At some point, that's got to happen, because at some point, I would think that Iran would run out of fire capacity. When and that is, I don't know, but at some point, and does that entail Israel or somebody putting boots on the ground? I don't know. But in the meantime, you've still got the risk of blowing up those pipelines on Karg Island that deliver all that crude from Iran in the cargo ships that then can sail out of Iran. That's always a risk. It's something that can happen. And that's one thing that Trump's administration is trying to do right now. They're saying, okay, we're at war, but let's not shoot each other's oil facilities. Let's just sort of leave those, off the map and be nice when it comes to oil facilities. But, this is war, and there are no rules at the end of the day.
Yeah, I was talking to a guy who was a big CIO at a hedge fund, and they had kind of gotten the word from the Trump administration that they wanted to get this thing off-ramped in the next 10 days or so. But again, I think it's like, last year, the liberation thing was totally in his control. It was his administration's idea. They put Lutnick in the closet, and they brought Besson out. And, if you saw on Sunday, they tried to put Besson on Sunday's show. That's like the adult in the room kind of guy. But again, as a guy who was in Dubai when the war started, I had that insight of like, hey, we can do through a few drones, we can do a few missiles, and the asymmetry of the situation is just not in our favor. And, I've heard that the Karg Island thing, like, man, maybe we take that and try and cripple them because that's such a large percentage of their revenue. But again, what does that do to oil? How much pain has to be? I think that's what we're going through. It's like, how much pain? Who can take the most pain, basically? Mm-hmm. in a big pain orgy that we're in right now. It's not exactly the most fun thing, is it, Jeff?
No, I mean, it's every crisis has this in common, where you kind of struggle through the day, you go to bed, and you wake up just to see what they screwed up overnight. What hell basket has been unleashed. Oh, they bombed the natural gas facility. What the hell? Like just stuff that just is not really in the playing field. To Bob's point, we started a war, and now we're trying to make rules. It's you don't punch a guy in the face 10 times and then say, okay, let's just cool things down a little bit here. Let's just, let's just relax a little bit. We've taken out a lot of top leaders, and there isn't a lot of regime change hope. And I don't know who we have kind of in the on deck circle to even take that over. So it's a situation, again, it's what these crises all have in common. Even though the tariffs were under our control, it seemed like, it was a bad news every day thing. The Liberation Day kind of unveil of, this is going to look like 40% tariffs on everybody. That lives on in history is one of the great unforced errors, but also just crazy town. Can they back away from it? The question this time is, can you get the other side to back away from it? Because they don't seem to want to, and they don't seem to be running low on drones just yet. We're assuming that there's a finite kind of amount of supply that they have. There probably is, but again, it doesn't seem to be a problem for them at this point.
Yeah, and remember, the current regime structure doesn't want a truce. Again, this is a religious.
Why would they possibly? We've ticked them off. We smashed a hornet's nest with a couple axe handles. I mean, I don't expect them to want a truce ever.
Right. They don't want a truce. They don't want a truce ever. And if there's a regime change, there are still millions of people over there that are on the side of the current regime that are going to cause trouble under a new regime that's not of their liking. I mean, it's not going to be a peaceful, if there is regime change, it's not going to be a peaceful, easy go about it, because there are still millions of people that align with what is the current regime that are going to cause disruption.
Yeah, and right. I guess if you think about it, like if from their standpoint, where clearly they can't go like, battle like Rommel versus Patton style out in the open field with the U.S., but in this strategy, they can inflict enough pain in financial market, like Dubai. People, they pull money out. Where they're gonna, where the piggy bank is. I don't know if you guys saw gold yesterday, but gold down 5 or 6% tells me someone was using that because they needed some money. You know what I mean? Like, and then you think about, well, the S&P, that seems like a good piggy bank. It's had a hell of a run, and there's so much foreign assets in here. And so the longer that goes, the closer we get to November and the midterms. And now Trump's coming out and saying, "Oh, I need $200 billion for this." Well, if you were a congressman in the GOP who maybe wanted to start distancing himself from the Trump administration, that would be a good tell. Hey, man, we're not sure. This is your war, buddy. And so there's just a lot of things. This is not a good time because all these rallies get faded. It's not going down fast enough that people's hedges. Now we'll see. Today's option expiration day, so there's a lot of people who had, option. And if you remember last year, Liberation Day, we sold a little bit from February into mid-March, hung in there, and then the hammer went down. And that's, often what happens, because when you're hedged, you don't care.